Hello, friends. You have found the Simple Grace podcast. My name is Shawn. Every week, we are going to have conversations about the new covenant of grace with my friends, people I meet, strangers on the street, who knows. I did write a book called A Simple Grace. It's available at simplegrace.life, where you can also contact me. So let's discover together how the new covenant of grace impacts our lives. All right, here we go. Well, I've broken my string of Nathans. So got a couple in there. My first few interviews were all Nathans, but today we're going with a Shawn. Not me, but my new friend, Shawn. How do you, let's see, I'm going to bring you in here. How do you say your last name?
Rubado.
Rubado. Okay. That's fun to say, by the way.
But no
Shawn, nobody probably knows that that's your name because everybody knows you as Moose, which is very fun to say also. Moose is my new friend. I'd say we haven't known each other too long, but we met at a function and we've talked a little bit, and so I'm very excited to have you on the podcast today. I think everyone will see why today that you're on the podcast as we kind of get into it. But I'd actually like to start our conversation by bringing the Word of God in just to kind of guide us today. So I'm going to read John chapter 1, verses 14 and 16 to just kind of get our hearts moving. And it says, "And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory, the glory as of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth." Of course, that's talking about Jesus being the Word, and he is so full of grace and truth. And then in verse 16, it says, "And of his fullness, we have all received grace for grace," which means grace, a never-ending supply of grace. And I think your life has been a picture of a never-ending supply of grace, but I'm going to let you kind of take it over. And why don't you tell us how the moose got loose?
The funniest thing, the moose got loose. So I was named Moose in the 6th grade, and it's a great little story. I'll start off with how did I become the moose, right? In 6th grade, we're playing a game, and literally the first day of school, and I was a quiet fat kid, and I'm like, I'm gonna make friends. So first recess, we go out, and I get the ball, and I run straight toward people, and I hit the first guy, and he just flew. I mean, hits the ground, glasses fall off. He gets up and goes, "You're nothing but a big moose." And I was like, oh, I just ruined my chance. Like right off my first recess, I go into class. Teacher calls my name, and the kid goes, "No, his name's Moose." And she did not even ask. She just crossed out my name, and my name was Moose. And everyone in the class called me Moose from that point on. Wow. So I've been a Moose for a long time.
So when did you start liking the name?
I liked it the second. I'm like, out of all the other things that people have called me, Moose is actually pretty cool. Like, kids are not nice. And so, hey, calling me a moose, I was like, hey, there's my alter ego right there. I am the moose. And so,
nice. So where'd you grow up? Where are you from? And what did that look like?
So I'm from Southern California, born in Huntington Beach, raised in Riverside. That's where I did my junior high school. Found God at like 24. My home life wasn't ideal. I didn't have that loving, nurturing mom. My mom was a drug addict, and so I started drinking at 14. By the age of 20, my liver was malfunctioning, so I switched to smoking marijuana. which I carried on up until like 2 years ago, where I smoked every single day, 24 hours a day, kept it hidden from everyone. Um, Came to God though. So my first encounter with God, we'll start there. First encounter with God, 24 years old. Got, was in the army, got out of the army, was just kind of drifting along in life, got fired from a job for no reason. And I'm sitting in my bathroom, and I'm an avid reader. I read tons of books. And I'm like, all right, God, I'm not going to read another book, another magazine, nothing until I finish the Bible. Just going to read it from start to finish. Some people say start in the New Testament. You know, that's because they want you to get all the warm and fuzzy feeling. I'm like, I read like the first 3 chapters of Matthew, and they're talking about the Old Testament. So I'm like, I don't even know what the heck they're talking about. So I just went, I'm going start cover to cover. And that started my journey with Christ right there. Unfortunately, I didn't really give my life to Christ um, until about 10 months ago is when I fully I dove in the water. I guess that's the best way to put it. I would put my foot in, put my foot out, do the hokey pokey, turn myself around. I was from 20 after I read the Bible, was active in church, was a youth minister, was a worship leader. But there were so many hidden aspects of my life that I just was a chameleon. So whatever, if I'm at church, here's my church face, right? Oh, but if I'm out with my homies from the neighborhood, what's up, dog? Like there wasn't any God in it. It was completely different people. And then I met this wonderful woman. I mean, she's a start that changed my life. She's no longer my woman, but that's because of the whole transformation on, when you're good and you're bad meet, right? When the good finally takes over, you have to count for all the bad, which is why your book on grace was one of my final pieces in finishing where God wanted me to be. So I met her. Prior to her, I really didn't care about anything in life. Like I didn't care. I didn't care really I cared about myself, my kids. Like I love my kids unconditionally, but I came from a woman who showed only conditional love, and a father who didn't really talk much up until like 2 years prior to him dying of cancer 10 years ago. Like that's when we became best friends. And he started like talking and being a father figure and mentor and stuff. So meet this wonderful woman. Her whole family's in God. I'm going to church. I go to church, but even when I first met her, I still had all the masks that I kept with everybody. Like I showed her the best version of myself, right? Like, but I kept a lot of things hidden from her. Um, and just insecurities within myself, low self-esteem coming from the upbringing that I did, not trusting. Then I realized like, oh my goodness, she's phenomenal. And now I'm like, wow, how do I deal with all the things I haven't told her for the last year and a half, right? And then God is all of a sudden, she lets out the emotional box. So I'm having.
I think something got muted on your end. Let's double check that real quick.
Okay, I don't know why. Yeah, so sorry about that, everyone.
That's all right.
So yeah, now I got to backtrack. She opens up this emotional box. I'd never felt unconditional love. I never trusted anyone until her. And And now I got all these emotions that I've never dealt with because I suppressed from weed and alcohol and sex. And so I got those like all like I'm not doing weed, sex, or alcohol anymore. And now I have all these emotions because I want to be my true, authentic self with her. But I have all this baggage that I'm bringing in. So I was a mess, really, because I've never, up until 18 months ago, I never felt guilt. I never felt shame. Um, like if it was a negative emotion, I just suppressed it, put it in a box, pushed it way down, and then smoked it away and made sure I didn't feel it or deal with it or anything. And it went away.
I've never met anyone who's ever done that before.
Right.
I'm just
finally all the darkness of just everything. I go like my dog dies, which triggers me into like when my dad died, because in 2013 my dog died, my dad died, and my wife divorced me, all within 6 months of each other. And so last year my dog dies, and now I'm an emotional guy, and here's my first trigger. And then my ex-girlfriend plans a trip without me. That triggers my ex-wife, and now I got and then I lost my job because I'm in the mortgage industry, and so I got all these things going on, and it's just getting dark, and I'm like, what is going on? And then my ex-girlfriend finally is like, I can't. We're in two different spots, and I'm pressuring her to marry me because I'm binge drinking on the side. I'm trying to get attention everywhere, and I'm like, well, if she just marries me, then all my problems will go away, right? That and turns out if I just turned to God, all my problems went away. So and I was having strife with my kids, my family. Like it was just she was the only piece in my storm, and then she left. And so of course you're crying, like, oh my God, now my one piece is gone. And that's when God comes to me and is like, oh, all right, are you ready to be real? Like, let's go through all these sins that you just didn't think I knew about. And so we talked.
yeah.
And
you think that's going to be a scary conversation, but you realize that he's not doing it to rub it in your face. He's doing it to set you free.
yes.
Right? Because I've never heard God yell at me or with disappointment in his eyes say, wow, I really expected more of you, right? All that I've ever heard from God in those situations is love, grace, and mercy. Or what about you?
I would tell you well, when I heard his voice, it was a little scary. I ain't gonna lie. Like I'm like, oh, okay. Like I'm crying out, and he answers, and I'm like, oh. And his first thing was, "Are you ready to be real with me?"
Yeah.
And it was just love, grace, and mercy. Like I felt like afterwards, I felt instantly like the start of the transformation,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because I've been sober. I hadn't plugged in yet, but he's like, you thought that doing all this that I was going to bless you. I was never going to bless you while you were like that. And it's true. Like I just like nothing ever came easy for me, but I was just mask my insecurities with overconfidence and arrogance, and I didn't feel anything, so I never felt fear. So I was like, I'll do it. Let's go. I'll run through a wall. I don't care. Oh well, this happened. Don't worry, I got it. It was that I got it, not like God's got it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So God was like, well, I just wanted to see how long you could go.
Yeah, let me know how that goes. Let me
Yeah.
know when you're done. We've It seems like we've all been there. It's even Paul, Paul in Second Corinthians, Paul at the very beginning, chapters 1, 2, and 3, he's like, man, I was going through something that hurt so bad. He describes it, and it really meant a lot to me with the suffering that I've gone through in my life. Paul says, I've going through something that was above measure, beyond strength, so that it despaired even of life. And those three descriptions just hit me so powerful. Above measure, like no one can know how deeply I'm hurting right now, because if you tried to measure it, there's no measuring tape that can go that deep. And then above measure, beyond strength, meaning there is absolutely nothing I can do to get myself out of this. I am here, and it seems like I'm going to be here forever, but I have to be rescued. I can't rescue myself. And then, so I despaired even of life. And Paul says, Paul, the great apostle, is like, yeah, I would have rather died. Yeah, suicide was definitely, tossed around. He, whether it was actual suicide or just like, Lord, let it end. I would rather die than go through this pain that I'm going through. And we've been through that. But Paul says this, and his whole point in bringing that up, he says, so that I would stop trusting in myself, but instead learn to trust in the God who raises the dead. You see, our own life, we have to come to this deadness where we just resign ourselves to that we have been on the cross with Jesus. I'm going to crucify my flesh. My flesh was crucified with Christ. That type of like resignation. And then new life is always a resurrection life. The thing that is resurrected has to be dead first. So the pain, yes, it's painful. It's so much pain that it actually is kind of like death. And as we die in this, dying to self, into the self sourced life, man, he rushes in with resurrection life, giving us grace upon grace, like that verse in John 1:16 that we read, just grace upon grace. So tell me, what was that grace like in your life? What did it feel like? What kind of verses were used to impact you, and relationally with God? What did that, I mean, you've already talked about a little bit, but go deeper on that for me.
Yeah, so that whole rush in, I don't know how fast he was rushing. He's kind of like, yeah, you need to feel this one. So, the verse that I stuck to the most was Isaiah 40:31. Right. That's kind of like my go-to, actually, I guess to back up, it would have been more like 40:28. Have you not known? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He does not faint or grow weary. His understanding is unsearchable. He gives power to the faint, and to him who has no might, he increases strength. Even youth shall faint and be weary, and young men shall fall exhausted. But they who wait for the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not be faint. So, that's one of them. I always go to good old Philippians. The one that,
4:13.
yeah, the one that my pastor always says we always say it wrong. He's all, it's always the misquoted verse in the Bible. I'm like, I know, but it's a good one. So, and 4:13, where, I could do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Right. But Philippians 4:12, I know how to be brought low and I know how to abound in any and every circumstances. I have learned the secret of facing plenty and hunger, abundance, and need. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. that that's one of the ones that I always just say to myself. Um, John, 1 John 4:19, we love because he first loved us, right? Like where did I get my love from? And I use that one. Um, and then another one that I love to do is Isaiah 41:10. Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. And those were the verses, and I keep them like in my phone. I literally read them every day because truthfully, I would not like my whole mission, which is why I'm speaking to like 11th and 12th graders as a youth leader, is to try to help people to never have to go through. I know why Paul was writing for what he wrote, because the last 8 months of my life, I would wish for nobody. Like that refined by fire, that's no joke. It's yeah, you feel grace, but to get to the grace, you got to burn off that old self. You got to burn through. You have to atone for your sins. I lost um, the single most important thing to me, but I gained an immense blessing. Like I lost something, which I know that the Lord, like Job, like I'm hoping that I'm a Job 2.0, right? Like he's just going to give it all back to me. Because the blessings that have happened now that I'm transparent, I've confessed my sins to everyone. I am my authentic self. I love myself down to my core being. I am who God made me to be. And I hear the blessings from other people because of who I am right now, right? And that's when when I felt grace, and then read your book and really like embrace the grace, right? Because you got years of old self that you feel guilty and shame, and you know what you did cost you a lot, um, and yet it's just by the grace of God. And you start thinking about but I have salvation, and look at all the other people that I'm now leading to Christ. Hearing things like, Shawn, if it wasn't for you, you saved my life, my family. Like if you didn't if everything didn't happen the way it did, I wouldn't be at church every single Sunday like I am now, and going to men's group. And and it wasn't just one person who said that. And I go to church, and the men's pastor is like, yeah, I had calls, like, gets my email. I don't even know how he gets my email, and he's like, yeah, everyone's been talking about you. I need to sit down and meet you and talk to you. And you're like, I've been in the church for 9 years and no one reached out and said anything to me, right? Like,
Yeah.
you start hearing that because now you're walking with God, and God's blessing me. He restored my children and our relationships, where my daughter called me dad for the first time in like 5 years. Like when she said it the first time, I didn't even recognize it. I was like, oh wait, you're talking to me. Like I haven't heard that from you in like forever. Like, um, so there's so many blessings. And then going through your book just on grace and Old Testament and law, and I realized like I was beating myself up still about my sins that I committed, instead of realizing like I've God forgave me for all those. Jesus died on the cross for every single one of them, and I confessed, and I did everything that God asked me to do, and now I'm just there to go spread grace and tell everyone about how wonderful grace is, and it's the same for everyone. And that's another great point in your book that I love. Like, grace is the same for everyone. If you're a murderer, guess what? And you give your life to Christ, that's covered in grace. Paul was a murderer. Paul, before, he was a Pharisee and used to condemn Christians before God got a hold of them, right? Like, a lot of people forget, like, the guy that wrote what, 3/4 of the New Testament was a murderer, like killed Christians,
Yeah.
Um, and so it really just fundamentally changed my view and helped me. And I know this is weird, but really regain my masculinity in God, like to know that I am a man, that speaks from God speaks to me, and as a man, I'm supposed to be controlled, steadfast. Which, as an emotional wreck I realized, like, oh, God kind of had a talk with me, like, okay, I understand I was speaking God to you, and you didn't understand. So let me dumb it down for you. Steadfast means you control yourself, and you stay within my peace and my joy and my happiness because of the grace that I've given you. I forgive you already, but you need to be a good example going out, and to do that, you must be bold and brave and secure and emotionally stable, because people are going to say things and you're not going to like them, and
Yeah.
you need to have everything in control. And it was really like the final piece, was just going through your book, and the bullet points and that you put in there, and going back and reading them, and really contemplating, like, I guess I shortchanged grace prior to your book. Is the best way I could put it in Moose terms. It's like I just shortchanged grace. Like, I didn't realize how vast and how big, and that was the whole reason why. They talk about forgive your sins, right? Like, Christ died to forgive your sins. Where reading your book, a better analogy for it is Christ died so you can have the grace of God upon you. It's more how I now see it.
Yeah. You mentioned responding, just having a steadiness. And so I made this video for my ministry, and it's been out on Facebook and stuff. And so I get some weird comments every once in a while. And just to show you, I still, like, I was like, oh, what? So this guy commented, because it's like connect with Simple Grace or whatever. And he commented, he's like, you should connect with a shaver. And I was like, oh man, come on, why you got to be like that?
Right.
So but it reminds me of the verse in Hebrews 13:9 that says, it is good for the heart to be established by grace. So many times our heart can be up and down, and so many Christians would describe that as their experience spiritually is up. When I'm performing good, I have an up, and then when I'm not doing so great, my emotions follow, and I'm down and up and down and up and down. Well, when you learn about grace and you learn about the new covenant, it sets you free by establishing your heart to keep you from getting too high, because it emphasizes humility and the importance of humility, and acknowledging that you still need God, even if there's good things in your life. So you don't get too high, and then you don't get too low either, because God's grace is there to just pick you up and remind you of your forgiveness, and also the deliverance that we have, the sanctification and transformation power working inside us, his Holy Spirit. So always good to have the heart established by grace. Helps our emotions to have more steadiness, like you were describing.
And when you're, and that's the pride, right? The pride is what I'm doing it, right? The highs and lows I found were more my pride in it when I realized God is the provider of all things. It's not me.
Yeah.
It's not me. Now, my free will obviously like put God in spots where he's not thrilled. Right? Like for 24 years after I confessed to him, and you say you're this Christian and you're doing all these things, he wasn't going to bless me. Like it just you're not walking on the narrow path. You're making your own path, and I'm just going to make it like the rough in golf. So feel free to go find that golf ball, but you're never going to find it.
Yeah, absolutely. I like the picture of grace is like a waterfall. God is so full of grace. And actually, that's like the verse we read. Jesus is full of grace, and he has every intention of just providing grace to us our whole lives. Everything we need, he's promised to give us. But we have the option of standing under that waterfall in humility and saying, yes, give it to me. I want to do your will. I want to be used by you. I need you. But then when we go into the rough, when we go our own path, we're removing ourselves out of where the blessing is, right?
Mhm.
And so God's heart for us never changes. His plan for us never changes. He's not upset with us, but we are experiencing maybe a famine type experience, not the blessings that we know kind of in our heart that belong to us. It's like, wait a minute, I'm your son. I'm supposed to have the blessing here. But yet, if we're walking after the flesh, walking in our own sufficiency, we're just not going to experience it, because he says, I give grace to the humble, but I oppose the proud. So it's that humility piece that really kind of can trip us up.
Oh, definitely. That's the whole reason the house of cards came falling down, is because I was walking in that rough thinking it was me, and God had told me he had been asking me to come follow him for 24 years.
Inviting
And
you. Yeah.
yeah, and he knew that there was one thing in my life that he knew would lead me to him. And when he took it away, if she doesn't come in my life, and now mind you, and I got to add this little backstory because this is really how God works, and it's kind of crazy. So we both had a best friend, and her name was Rachel. And 8 years ago, God tells me, like, you need to reach out to this girl. Mind you, me and her in high school, this girl, I knew her since high school. We did not like each other. We were not friends. She was popular, I was popular, but we both had attitude, and our attitudes didn't like each other's attitudes. Like I wrote something so terrible in her face in like her yearbook. It was like, when can I get my turn? That's how I signed her yearbook, like because I just did not care. So we graduated, had never didn't talk to her 20 some odd years. God's like, you need to reach out to her. I'm like, God, that's a bad idea. Like, I haven't talked to her. Like, I'm not reaching out to her. God's like, yes, you are. And I'm like, no, I'm not. And so it was like a month of me saying no. I gave grace that God gave me a month. And then finally, it's literally like I was sitting down right here, and it was just in my head so much. He was just in my head. I couldn't work. I couldn't move. I couldn't do anything. I was just stuck. And I finally send out this Facebook message to her, and I'm like, look, hi, Rachel, you're going to think I'm crazy. And I think I'm kind of crazy right now, too. But God wants you to hear this. And I wrote down just everything that God put. Well, she happened to be in an abusive relationship, was like at the low of her lows, and like ready to give up on life. And she responds back, I'm bawling. So me and her become best friends. Well, 3 years ago, we're on Facebook, me, my ex-girlfriend, and Rachel. And my ex-girlfriend, we're on like, this guy's talking about single moms, and I just kind of pipe in like, well, what about us single dads? Because I have 100% custody of my sons. And so, I'm everything. I'm dad, mom. I do dishes, laundry, like clean the house. Like I go provide, make, I do it all too. Like us single dads, we're tough out here. And so my ex-girlfriend hearted it. And then my best friend, Rachel, goes, "Oh, Chelsea's flirting with you." I'm like, she's not flirting with you. She's all, watch, write anything else, and I bet she hearts it. And so I write something else, and Chelsea hearts it. And that's how me and Chelsea met. Was, if it wasn't for me listening to God to talk to Rachel, and Rachel and Chelsea were lifelong best friends, then I would have never met Chelsea, and my life wouldn't be my life that it is right now, because Chelsea is the one that that made me open up my ears to God, and by losing her, give my whole life to God, because I knew I wasn't living the right way.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a neat story. That's a neat story.
Right? Like, I mean, you can't even write a Hollywood script like that one right there.
Awesome. Well, you're now a mortgage broker. You're being used by God, and you're spreading God's grace. So thank you so much for being my guest on the podcast. I think this was a really powerful episode. I think it's going to be used a lot. So if anyone wants to get in contact with you, is there any way that we could do that? What do you think?
Oh yeah. I'm like, you put my name on Google, my name's everywhere. Like I'm first page on everything. So yeah, Shawn, Shawn, SHAWN .Rubado, RUBADUE @gmail.com. Or if you type in the Mortgage Moose on Google, first page.
Okay.
Feel free to reach out if you have any questions. I know I was all over the place, but that, you guys just got my whole walk with the Lord here in 48 years and 36 minutes. I think that's pretty good right there.
Hey, we got our money's worth.
Right? I
Awesome.
appreciate you letting me on the podcast, Shawn. If you guys haven't bought his book, I'm telling you, Simple Grace, like I'm sending it out to everybody. It's seriously like a profound version of grace that will get you thinking, and it will change you. I mean, it's impossible for you not to get a nugget out of it. It's impossible for you not to come away with a better understanding of grace and what grace means to your life.
Man, those are kind words. I'm humbled. So thank you very much. I appreciate that. All right. We're going to wrap it up here. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. You're loved, and God is full of grace for you. Always remember that. We'll see you next time. Well, guys, I hope you were blessed by this conversation about Simple Grace. If you would like to connect more with the ministry, go to simplegrace.life. There's a way to contact me straight on there. You can also get my book on Amazon. Just look up Simple Grace, or an Audible, same thing there. I'd love to connect with you. I am doing conferences and pastoral coaching, staff training, men's retreats, all kinds of public speaking events and stuff like that. So I would love to connect with you. Please drop us a line. Thank you so much for being a part of this community.